Have you
Yeah.
noticed that like people in toxic relationships really do have like pretty steamy erotic sex?
I see that, and I think it's because they're starving in all the other categories. They're so
Mm,
hungry that they'll take those crumbs. They'll just scarf
ah,
them up because there's just so much missing elsewhere. So they take, like, the proximity of skin being together as closeness because that's the only
right.
closeness they can get because it's not happening any other way.
I think that
Mhm.
that's exactly it. That's often the only time that there is maybe not fight. Well, that's not even true. Maybe sometimes you're fighting, you're still fucking. Like I don't,
Right?
whatever. This is Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. Hey, welcome to Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. Today I'm hanging out with Whitni Miller, sex educator and pleasure coach. We talk all about the 5 types of intimacy and foreplay, and we get candid about our personal favorites. Okay, Whitni, well, I have got you here finally to chat with you, and I am so excited about this. We were just talking about before we started recording, we connected over my intimacy wheel that I had posted months ago, and you did a really cool TikTok video on it. So thank you for being here. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to meet you and to be here. This is awesome.
And your content on intimacy and on connection, and not just on the types of intimacy, but I repost your stuff sometimes about even how to show up safe for your partner and what that means for intimacy and how to create that connection. And so I want to start by talking about those 5 types of intimacy that we connected over, and then we'll kind of go from there. So let's start with, well, why don't you pick? Where do you want to start? What's most
Let's
comfortable?
start with, man, I love the one about experiential intimacy, like having new
Okay.
experiences with your partner. I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful, and people kinda especially in long-term relationships, it feels like that kinda fizzles out.
Right. And the novelty of that is so important. And I think that that's one of my favorite types of intimacy as well. My favorite types of foreplay is that the
Yeah.
adventure, the going on journeys together and trying new things. What are some of the things that you and your partner like to do when it comes to the experiential foreplay?
Oh my gosh, we're into food. We're like big foodies. So anytime we can go
Same.
somewhere and eat something new and just like, next to each other, it makes for, later. It's
Yes, exactly. Do you guys like get your own meals? Do you share like when you go together, do you have to share? What do you do?
We always order something different, so you can eat off each other's plate. So it's
Yes.
always like, "What's the thing that you wanna get?" And then, "Okay, I'll get the second thing that we wanted to get," and that way we get to try it all.
Exactly, same. And then when it comes to even trying new activities, so
Mm,
whether it's traveling together or just going somewhere, that you've never been, but I do agree that the novelty piece of that is
mhm.
such a crucial part of intimacy and connection. So when, you're keeping that dopamine
Yeah,
flowing, that is so crucial.
that's the word.
What about emotional intimacy? How would you define that?
Oh my gosh. Emotional intimacy, that's like showing courage, when you're gonna be vulnerable with somebody, you're showing them that you have courage, and courage creates consistency, and consistency creates trust. So if you're willing to open up your chest and be openly emotional with someone, then you're starting to create trust, and there we got safety. And once we're safe, then we can really get turned on.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And that really is, I think, the foundation of any of these types of intimacy is the safety. When we can feel
Mhm.
safe just to be in each other's presence. There's so many relationships. I don't know if you have any personal experience with like the toxic cycle or in your past relationships of just a lack of safety. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some
Yes.
relationships where it just felt like there's no way. There's no way. And
Yeah.
then I just don't want to take off my clothes with that person and, be vulnerable with them because it's like, oh man, it's not safe here. Like it's not even safe to have a conversation with you. I don't want
Yeah.
skin against yours. Like, have you had experiences like that where
No,
you
absolutely. And I think that the, toxic cycle that I reference quite a bit, it's like the polar opposite of intimacy. It is creates such a guardedness and such a disconnect that you don't know what to expect. You're on eggshells. You like at any minute shit can just blow up. And I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. It's hard to have intimacy, physical intimacy, sexual intimacy when that's the case. However, on that note, have you
Yeah.
noticed that like people in toxic relationships really do have like pretty steamy erotic sex?
I see that, and I think it's because they're starving in all the other categories. They're so
Mm,
hungry that they'll take those crumbs. They'll just scarf
yeah,
them up because there's just so much missing elsewhere. So they take, like, the proximity of skin being together as closeness because that's the only
right.
closeness they can get because it's not happening any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. I think it does tie into that intermittent reward system, the way that I describe it when it's super spicy and almost addictive when you're in a toxic relationship. I think that
Mhm.
that's exactly it. That's often the only time that there is maybe not fight. Well, that's not even true. Maybe sometimes you're fighting, you're still fucking. Like, I don't,
Right.
whatever. But I think you're right. It is like the only time when there is that skin to skin, that there is the closeness. And so
Mhm.
it's perceived as closeness when it's really just sex. It's really just fucking.
It really is. I mean, do you feel like that it's part of that runner chaser dynamic, like that
Yeah.
classic, like, anxious avoidant chase back and forth?
Absolutely, which is where we see a lot of those breadcrumbs come in with the anxious
Mhm.
avoidant dance. And we also see the toxic cycle, I think, is really wrapped up in the anxious avoidant dynamic. When that anxious avoidant dynamic is done correctly, and when you're aware of the
Mhm.
strengths of it and aware of how to really tap into what can go well with those type of attachment styles, it's a
Yes.
different story. But when you
Yeah.
both are operating protectively, I think that's when that happens.
Oh my gosh, that's such a just got me going because that's such a beautiful point because we can work from those insecure attachment places if we're aware of what's
Yeah.
happening. Like, you don't
Yep.
have to stay there. You can just
Right.
use your awareness to notice what is happening and communicate from those points. And that can be your emotional intimacy is like, I'm scared. This is triggering my abandonment
Mhm.
and like sharing your interior world, which is the true intimacy.
I love that. Such a good point. When we can be vulnerable, that is a big aspect of this emotional intimacy. And you're right. When we talk about our insecure attachment styles, that's a big part of that, like to allow someone to see that side of you.
Oh gosh. That's like, ooh, it gets you so it's almost that thin line of, like, fear and excitement, and then, oh gosh, the heightened states of arousal that you can get from that level of vulnerability. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. When somebody can show up for you safe in those situations.
Ugh,
Absolutely.
right? Have you had
Um,
those experiences, like, feeling super safe with somebody, so it's just, like, that vulnerability almost feels high?
yes, and it's so interesting because I was married for 17 years and I've been divorced for about three and a half. He's still very important person to me, and we have so much safety, and that was never like a big concern. It was more the chemistry piece that we, there's lots of contextual stuff there, but that was not the issue. But then when I my first relationship out of being divorced was with somebody who there was a lot of chemistry but a lot of chaos, and so it was a lot of toxicity was wrapped up in that. And so it was like all of a sudden I had this really like high, but also these really fucking low lows that
Oof.
the high was not worth it. And then I've been dating somebody the past few months where it's this
Mhm,
balance of it. Like we still have conflict with like that all still exists for sure.
yeah.
But his ability to hold space for me and be safe and for us to
Mhm.
still have chemistry and that sexual connection and attraction, yeah, that's been a bit of a wild experience, which you
Yeah.
talk about your partner a lot. And I think you can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love the consistency and the stability. Like, I know some people they fear that, like, oh, isn't that going to get boring? And I'm like, well, it's we can go so much deeper because it's so
Yeah.
safe. There is almost, just infinite how deep we can go because there's so many like safety nets there. Like, oh, she's going to catch me. So if
Right.
we're really high, I know I'm not going to hit the ground on a low.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then also that boring piece, which is a really common question, but
Hmm.
because you can go so much deeper, you're talking about so much more, you're doing so much more, you're exploring
Yes.
so much more.
Yes, and you're growing, and that's what's really exciting is, like,
Right.
watching yourself grow because that's the thing about humans, like, we're driven for attachment. So a lot of our healing happens in these relationships, whether
Yes.
they're friendship or romantic or sexual or whatever, is that there's this like weird thing that people think, some people think that you should do all your healing before a relationship. And I'm like, honey,
Yeah, that is
the
not
healing
a
never
thing.
ends. Like,
How did you do your healing though to find this safe partner that you currently have? So if you went through these toxic cycles and then now you guys have so much safety, what did go on for you in order to find that?
yeah. So I was with my son's father for 10 years. So there was that relationship that taught me a lot, taught me how gay I am. And then, was, I started dating after that. And those relationships that just like, I don't want to say that they weren't enough. They just weren't for me. They sharpened me. I got more specific the more I dated and was like, this isn't quite right. It's kind of like the three bears in the porridge. Like this porridge is a little cold. This one's too hot. And just trying to find the one that was just right was about me having a tolerance for uncomfortable conversations. Like I heard someone say that they were like, your ability to find satisfying relationships is directly correlated to your tolerance for uncomfortable conversations. And I'm like,
Interesting.
that hit me big time because I see that. Like I have those conversations that feel awkward and they make me feel like you get that fear of rejection because you're putting your wants and your desires on the table in front of somebody and you're asking that person, like, do you want to do this with me? And you wait and you're like, got your heart just out there. And it's exhilarating and it's scary, but like, that's the only way I feel like you can get what you want is to be very sharp and specific. You know?
Right. And those hard conversations, even last night, I'm like, and as a relationship expert, and then I'm like, what the fuck is your problem that you can't have hard conversations? And like, so he and I were having a conversation last night and like, he just needed me to be safe, but then I got triggered. So then I couldn't, and it's like, and we're able to identify like, okay, this is just a hard conversation. Like we can have hard conversations, but even my point being, no matter how long you do the work, no matter how much healing you do, no matter how much knowledge you have, hard conversations are hard.
They are. Do you ever catch yourself like when you're coaching a client or when you're with someone, you hear yourself and you're like, maybe I should apply that, what I'm saying.
Oh my God, all the time. And I think that's like his favorite thing when I'm like, I was working with this client on oh, were you? Okay. Tell me more about that.
Maybe you should tell me about this one.
I think that some of my best insights for myself comes through that, because I'm able to remove myself from it and so help them to process through. But I see so many similarities that I'm like, oh shit. Oh yeah. Okay. I guess I should probably apply that too. Yeah. There's a lot of my own healing that comes from that for sure. What about for you?
Oh my gosh. I love my client relations because it's like holding up a mirror for myself. I feel like, if you're going to coach, then you have to be doing the same thing. Yes. It's like you have to be living the life that you're trying to coach people toward. Because otherwise, what are you talking about? You're going to read them a book. You have to like have that experiential intimacy with this work. It's like,
Yes. And then also having grace though for yourself that yes, you do need to be doing the work and you do need to have self-awareness and you need to be able to identify where your areas of growth are. And you still have trauma and you still have trauma triggers and you still have an insecure attachment and all of that.
Absolutely. Going to make mistakes. Got to show yourself grace. We're humans. Fallible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the next. Let's see. We did experiential, we did emotional, intellectual. Intellectual foreplay that's my jam.
One of my favorites. Like,
how did you define that?
Brain. Oh, touch me.
Yes, absolutely. That's what are some ways you describe intellectual foreplay?
Oh my gosh.
Or intimacy.
My partner and I love to read the same book. Like I'll be like, babe, I'm reading this. And do you want to read it with me? And she's like, yeah. So we started getting into BDSM. So we started reading like the New Topping book by Janet Hardy and Dossie Easton. And she was reading the Bottoming book and she would like highlight and we would call each other and like discuss these ideas and like the energy that's created by that. And I would get so hot for her, just the way that she could dig deep into this stuff, like way past the surface and get underneath to like the emotional intimacy that's created by doing these trust exercises and like
Mm.
going deep on consent and like enthusiastic consent and collaborating together to create heightened states of arousal. I was just like, this is the one right here.
This one did it. Yeah, and that intellectual foreplay, the intellectual intimacy, that being the connection through these deep conversations, through learning, through teaching each other things. And yeah, that is the sapiosexual thing is no joke. I will tell you that. Yeah,
Right? You ever
for
had
sure.
somebody like teach you something and it just, oh, you're like goosebumps.
Yes, or even just talking about like what what they're an expert in, or what they just talking about their own stuff, but you're like just learning as you're listening to them talk. And it's like, why are you so smart and so sexy? And please just take me because
Like when you're
you're
really
just
passionate about something and they're all lit up
yes.
and going on, it's just like, oh
Right.
yes, yes.
Right. So for me, it's like museums, going,
Mm,
art museums or, anything like that, going to, yeah, places where you can learn and experience just, which ties into the experiential. But I think it's also about, like you're saying, being able to dig deeper into it. And so, so he and I will love to go to a museum and then maybe go have lunch or something like that after and dissect all of that. And that is by far my favorite thing ever.
oh my gosh, like listening to someone's interpretation, like if you both looked at the same thing and then going deep,
Right.
what were your feelings and thoughts about, oh, so good.
That is it. Yes. Okay. Spiritual intimacy.
Yeah. So that one was easy for me and my partner. We're both yoga practitioners. We've both been doing that for, I've been doing it for 7 years and she's been doing it for about 5. And we take it deeper than like the physical practice on the mat. Like it's very much meditation and pranayama and like what we find inside of ourselves. And
Mm,
then coming to share that. Like last week, I was struggling with anxiety. And I was like, I'm going to have to reintroduce my meditation because I feel like that negative default in my brain is taking over. And
yeah.
I'm kind of a slave to it at this point instead of it working for me. And she's
Right.
very encouraging and supportive of that. And then I can just come to her and talk to her about what I experience in meditation. And she does that with me, or what she experienced on the mat when we do the physical practice. We both do hot yoga. So we
Mm,
both have that like sweat and that need to like dive really deep inside because it's a 105-degree room.
right.
So I love sharing that passion with her.
Yeah, that the meditation, the soul connection really, but also
Mm,
a lot of people, even if it's more religious based versus spirituality, like still
yes,
finding connections through prayer or through Bible reading together. Really when like I mean that's really it. Like when your souls are doing a dance together, I think that's a big piece of the
ooh,
spiritual. Yeah.
that's so deep because then it's just like 2 bodies and 1 mind at that point.
Yeah.
Because it's very heady stuff.
What about so tantric sex, right?
Mhm.
That's do you
Yeah.
practice wait, am I allowed to ask that? Am I allowed
Yeah,
to ask if you
totally.
practice
Yeah, I'm
that?
an open book. You can dig in it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, tantra to me is like the Buddhist practice as a whole. So we practice
Okay.
those kinds of mindfulness. But yeah, I feel like definitely we're incorporating like tantric practices, like we breathe together and do eye gazing and things like that to ramp up the connection and bring us present. Because arousal works best when you're present to the moment. It's a little harder
Right.
when you're drifting above yourself, judging, kind of.
Can you break down what that like kind of explain what that is I guess for me as well, but for, people listening, what exactly is that practice and how does it usually work?
Are you talking about like the eye gazing or the breathing together practice?
Just the tantra in general. Like what does that even mean? What's it about? How is it practiced?
Oh my gosh. So tantra is a Buddhist practice. So it's a philosophy. It's an entire philosophy. It's hard to break down, but basically what it is much like yoga. The word yoga is Sanskrit for union. So you're trying to find the oneness of everything.
Mm.
Everything is one. It's coming out of the singularity, and you come back home to the point of like, I'm no different than that blade of grass out there. Like it's all just living, and
Ah,
we're all
okay.
connected to it. So it's a very huge spiritual practice, but there are sex practices that come out of it, which are great. And that comes from like in the yogic system, tantra kind of forked off because there was a lot of renunciance in renunciation, where people are like saying that celibacy was like the path to oneness,
Mm.
and like tantra was kind of saying, no, no, we don't have to do that. But they are very big on consent. So certain tantric practices talk about like how children are our deepest karma. So when you go to make a child, you do it very intentionally.
Hmm.
And no, like a person with a penis is to enter a person with a vagina without the person with the vagina inviting them in. So they'll actually, part of the practice will be to grab the penis and gently guide it into the yoni, like you are invited into here and I welcome
Ah.
it.
And so it's empowerment then. It's safety.
Yes, a lot of consent, safety, empowerment, and
Okay.
being present with each other.
And when you're talking about the eye gazing and what was the other one that
Like
you had said?
breathing together. So there's different breath practices. So
Okay.
sometimes we'll do like circular breathing. You sit in front of each other and you match inhale and exhale. And then at a point, one of you will exhale and one holds the breath. And then when the other person inhales, then you exhale. So now
Mm.
you're like sharing a breath because
Oh,
you're inhaling and
fascinating.
exhaling different times. So that's great because it gets you locked into your partner's breath rate, which is something you should always pay attention to, like when you're having intimacy together, because this tells you how fast, how slow, when they liked something, when they didn't. You can tell by the way somebody's breathing.
So is that often something that takes place like almost like a meditative practice leading into
Mhm.
sexual intimacy, or that's something that takes place during, or what, how does that, I mean, obviously probably unique for everyone, but
Yeah. It can be utilized before, during, and after. So it can be a part of your aftercare is like co-regulating and breathing together. That can be really helpful for people, especially if they have those orgasms where they cry.
mm,
Sometimes that's startling to people. They need to be grounded. But we like to use it before as like part of foreplay, just like coming present with one another before we get started. And then I just make it an anchoring practice during sex to pay attention to my partner's breath.
ah, okay, yeah, that's really beautiful. With when you're working with clients and you're introducing this idea, do you have people who say like, "Oh my God, that's just too awkward. There's no way I could." How do you
Absolutely.
okay, because I'm just picturing like we're just so silly and like laughing about everything all the time. And so to think being so serious, but it is such a beautiful practice. How do you get people to kind of
Yeah.
warm up to it?
You know, I encourage them to be silly. I'm like, if you need to laugh about it, like laugh about it, like be silly. Like sex should be playful. It should be
Yeah.
playtime. And just allow it to be silly until it's not. You know, some things are funny until it's too hot for them to be funny. And
Right.
I just like to let
Not so fun
people
anymore.
playfully get into that. And it's
Yeah.
just like, if you need to laugh about it or be silly, do that. That's how I instruct people. Like when they're putting a strap on for the first time, it's no different because they feel really silly with like this big dildo hanging off the front of them. So I'm like, do the helicopter, swing that thing around, you know, slap it on the table a little bit. It's funny until it's hot.
Take pride in that thing.
That's right. Absolutely.
That's a great suggestion, though. I mean, I'm thinking even when I'm teaching clients new communication skills and
Mhm.
teaching somebody how to use the validating statements, as you know, silly as that might sound, is really awkward for a lot of people. They're like, that sounds
Yeah.
so corny. That sounds so cheesy. And so I say the
Mhm.
same thing, then laugh about it, tease each other.
Yes.
And that's, yeah. And then it starts to become more comfortable.
Do you feel like that's like a self-worth thing that makes them kind of deflect that self-validation work?
I think it's a self-judgment thing because I even think about a lot of the like if I'm worried that my partner might judge me or think that I look stupid or silly about something, even I identify as a really confident person. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that I don't give a shit what you think. When it
Yes.
comes to my partner, I do care. Like I notice that I'll get a lot more insecure about things that normally I wouldn't even think about. And so I think that that's probably what happens for a lot of people, that it's like,
Mhm.
if they're just with a group of their friends, or even you and I both know the shit we post on social media, like you've got to have some level of confidence to put some of that stuff out there.
For
But
sure.
then when it's just the one-on-one intimacy, I'm like, can get kind of shy.
Yes, there is more pressure when it's just you and one other person.
Right.
Oh, it's all about me.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, I do think it has to do with like the self-judgment piece. What do you think when it comes to that?
I just it's almost every time I'm working with a client, we're working with some people pleasing
Yeah.
tendencies, and there's just a lot of self worth things that come up. And I feel like sex is that conversation where you're asking for what you want and you're asking the person you want it from. And oh boy, that just makes it really awkward. Like,
Mm,
because people love to talk about sex. You talk to them, they're always hungry, like foaming at the mouth, ready to talk about it, but they don't want to talk about it to the person that they're going to have it with. That's like the
yes.
last person they want to talk to it about.
That is exactly it. And I talk about that all of the time. When clients will come in and tell me everything, and or they'll tell, right. But then when you tell them to talk to each other about it,
Oh,
mhm,
changes the
what do
whole.
you think that's about?
I just feel like it comes back to that, like you're talking about self judgment and self worth. Like they start to ask themselves internally, do I deserve this thing?
Mm,
And then they take it when someone tells them, no, I don't want to do that. Then they internalize it as, well, I didn't deserve it because they said no. And I'm
yeah.
always like, no just means not here. It's
Mm.
not rejection, it's redirection. So it's like, maybe you want to find the compromise that feels like growth between you, but like also maybe if that thing meant a lot to you, you still deserve it. Like,
So then at that point, it kind of becomes this acceptance or change. So they can accept that
mhm,
their partner is saying no to that. And so what does that mean for them? Or if
mhm,
it's something that they still want and desire, what does that look like of how they go find it?
right. Because, that's, ah, that's the kicker. It's like you still deserve this thing. So how much does it mean to you?
Yeah.
And, what do you want to do with this information that you got through this conversation? That's something that I say with clients a lot. Like, what do you want to do with this information?
Mm. Well, that's a deep thought. Yeah,
Mhm.
because they are empowered to decide that circle of control. Like they
Absolutely.
get
It's
to
your
decide what
life.
to do. Yeah. So let's talk about physical intimacy.
Yeah.
And what I noticed after maybe I'm going to have to do a modification to that. So I noticed like I kind of combine sexual intimacy. That's probably the missing one, I guess, if I were to redo the wheel, would be
Okay.
that sexual intimacy being its own thing versus I tied it into physical, which there's an argument for both sides. But
Okay.
how would you describe physical intimacy?
I love touch. I love to reach out and touch my partner all the time. Like she'll be passing me in the kitchen and I'll reach out and just like touch her wrist softly, just to be like, I see you there. I just want to make contact with you. We're very big on cuddling, holding hands, forehead kisses. She calls them eye socket kisses, but it's eyelid kisses. She'll say, I want eye socket kisses. Uh,
Like butterfly kisses? Is
Yeah,
that
she wants me to press my lips into her eyelid and, like, push in a little bit, and it does kind of become an eye socket kiss, but she
that's
loves
so
it.
cute?
It is, it's precious, and I love it, and, like, if we were only having sex and I couldn't do eyelid kisses and little touches in the kitchen anymore, I would just feel a really big gap in my relationship.
Yes. So physical intimacy really being anything from the nurturing touch all the way
Mhm.
to the sexual
Yeah.
whatever that is, the sexual intimacy piece of that. But yes, I agree. And that I think what often gets missed in a lot of relationships is the physical foreplay, I guess, across the board. That means that it's happening all day, that we're building tension all day leading
Right.
up to it. And I think that that's a lot of people are only touching, they're doing the awkward like reach out with the to the leg under the blankets at night, or they're doing the awkward like that's the only time you're touching trying to initiate, and it's like
Yes. And
ew.
then you get people who are now doing, what was it? Vanessa Marin calls it the bristle, because now your partner is like perceiving every touch as you want to initiate sex because this is the only time you touch me.
Yes. And that's exact. I was just working with a couple recently on that of how can we break that? And so for
Mhm.
them, it was really communicating that, okay, I want to cuddle, but that's all I want to do is I want to cuddle, or I want to hold hands, but and so it was really creating communication around, I want to touch you more, but I don't want all those expectations that come along with it all of
Yeah.
the time.
absolutely, because then we start doing that thing where we don't go to bed at the same time because it's like, oh,
Yes.
they're going to start that thing. So I need to go to bed after they're already asleep. And
Or
it's,
the pillow wall.
oh, not the pillow wall.
The pillow wall is such a thing.
Yes, it is. It is a thing. Or they even the sleeping in separate bedrooms. And then I've had clients who go spend the night at friends' houses for, weekends at a time. I'm like, just talk about the thing, like speak it. The elephant's in the room. Talk about it.
Yeah. And the other piece of physical intimacy that I don't think is talked about enough, which I know you'll be happy to dive in this with me, is two things. So first of all, self-care, like physical self-care when it comes to being attractive to your partner. So like just because you're in a committed relationship does not mean your partner has an obligation to find you attractive or sexy, especially if you're not putting any efforts into that. So let's start with that. Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Ooh, my partner is the most attractive to me after we have like either like deep emotional intimacy or we have experiential intimacy. So it's like, yeah, I love to see her taking care of herself, but the thing I love most is to see her feeling herself. So it's
Okay.
like, yeah, if you're not taking care of yourself internally, there's kind of like a shutdown. And it's like you start feeling negative about yourself, it starts showing up on the surface. So it's
Yeah.
like an inside thing that really needs to be addressed that makes your
Right.
outside appearance better. So it's that lift. So whatever my partner needs to do to be like, I'm a bad bitch, feeling like she's a bad bitch in the morning, I'm here to support that. If it's a face mask, cool. If it's, going to see a therapist, let's do that. Like everything in between.
I completely agree. I do think it impacts in an individual how they feel about themselves, and then how they feel about themselves. I mean, how many times have you heard, well, I don't want to have sex anymore because I gained weight, or I don't want to have sex anymore
Yeah.
because X, Y, and Z, where their partner's like, no, that's not, I still want to
Yeah.
have sex with you.
Yes.
But I really do think the lack of self-care
Mm-hmm.
impacts self-esteem. But then also I think about it from the lens, which is probably very controversial, so it is what it is. But if you get in a relationship with somebody and they look a certain way, and then all of a sudden they just don't even care about those things. I mean, this could even come down, which is what we're going to head into. Let's actually head into this next part. So hygiene.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about hygiene, because this is another aspect that comes up a lot. Y'all can't just be splashing some water down there and thinking that somebody.
No, you got to do a sense check. That's what I do. Like if my partner is about to go down on me, I reach down and do a little swipe, and I'm like, and I just do it right in front of her. I'm like, I'm just gonna check it. I'm like, and see if I would eat it, and if I would eat it, I would let her eat it. So it's like,
and if not, then you're like, let me go take a quick shower.
I'm gonna go take a shower. I just say that. I'm like, I'm gonna go wash. Like if you want to go do that, I'm like, I wouldn't eat that. I'm gonna go.
Which is also, I believe, which again, I know people have different preferences, because there's plenty of people that are like, they don't care. And I think that's fine. I think day-to-day hygiene, though, probably needs to be maybe attended to a little more than it is.
Right. Well, I mean, the main thing about self-care is you're doing it to communicate to yourself that you care about yourself. So if you don't care about yourself, it's hard for you to feel sexy. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also then having the expectation, and I think so, whether it's the hygiene or it's the physical self-care or just the emotional self-care, I think the expectation of my partner should just love me just the way I am, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say, yes, they should love you the way you are. Yeah. And you should want to be your best self for your partner. And so that does require self-care.
Yeah. I mean, there's self-maintenance, and there's the self-care, and like, you need to care about yourself. Like that's what gets you out of that, like having body image issues to the point that you're shutting your own arousal off kind of thing. And it's like, at the end of the day, love's a verb. So it's expressed through effort. It's something you do. Yeah. It's not a noun. It's not a feeling. It's an action.
Which also means that, how can you take care of yourself? How can you put in work towards personal improvement? How can you show up your best self for your partner? But as you bring up the term or the word arousal, let's talk about that as well. What is the difference between desire and arousal? How do you describe that?
The way I describe that to clients is like desire is the mental want. So mentally, you're like, I want to have sex. And it may just be like, I want to masturbate. So it could be I want to masturbate or I want to have sex with a person. And then arousal is it's in your body. That's your physical feeling of being turned on. And I mean, there can be arousal non-concordance where you feel turned on in your mind, but your body's not getting the message. But
Mm-hmm.
arousal is usually the felt experience in the body, being like horny. That's usually the word that people can understand in the general population. Oh yeah, I know what you mean now.
How do you help people who struggle to feel horny? How do you
Oh
help
yeah.
people to increase that arousal?
Oof, yeah. So that's usually a mind-body disconnect. So then I ask them questions like, are you aware of your body? Does your body feel like a safe place to be? Is usually like the top question is like, does your body feel like a safe place to be? Because if they're like, no, then it's a slow trek to get from, because they're usually like in their cognitive space. These people like live in their head. It's a survival mechanism. So usually
Mhm.
there's trauma behind there. So we want to be slow and gentle and easy as we walk them from their brain back down to their body. Because if you've been ignoring your body for a long time, usually when you get down there, there's going to be alarm bells going off. It could be as simple as like cracked heels because you've not been moisturizing, but it could be like frozen shoulder, big deal stuff where you've just not been paying attention. And so you've not been taking care of your body because you didn't hear the signs or feel them.
Right. And then that creates definitely quite the barrier when it comes to so any of these physical, emotional, spiritual, experiential, spiritual,
Mhm.
experiential, what did I miss in there? Intellectual. When it
Mhm.
comes to any of these types of intimacy, if there's a disconnect between your heart and your mind, between your body and your mind, that makes it really hard to dig into any of this intimacy. Or because if
No,
you don't feel safe in your own body, how are you going to allow or invite somebody else and feel safe with them that close to your body?
absolutely. Well, you're probably most likely just going to go through the motions. So now you're just having sex done to you instead of with you because you're just kind
Mhm.
of along for the ride. Because now we're into performance-based sex where it's like, does this look good? Does it look good? Does it look good? And I always ask clients like, does it feel good? Like that's the
Mm.
only question you should be asking. It doesn't matter how it looks. Like really great sex is bad for camera angles because our bodies are so mushed up. You can't see anything anyway. But like, so it's not about how it looks. It's always about how does this feel?
Yes, I love that. Pleasure over performance is so important.
It's
And
very
I agree that that's a to make a beautiful porno, they're probably not being very intimate in that moment.
Oh, they're so far away, usually it's some guy who's doing a plank on top and it's just like poking away.
Right. I mean, yeah, everything that gets going when there's that true intimacy for sure.
Mhm.
What are a couple pieces of takeaway that you would give to people for just in general really improving intimacy? Like what would be a couple nuggets there?
Oh my gosh, like, yeah, just right back to that performance base, so stop asking yourself, "How does this look?" Stay with the, "How does this feel?" And don't hold your breath. Oh, that's a big one. People are always like, "Oh, it's such a hard time having an orgasm and stuff, or I have a hard time being present." I'm like, "Do you hold your breath?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Once you're holding your breath, you're in the future. You're like, "Am I close? Am I close? Am I close? Am I close? Am I close?" Like,
Mm.
you're not here. You're not here. Everything's happening here in the present. So breathe and remind your partner to breathe. Like if you notice that they're holding their breath, just get in their ear and just be like, "Breathe, baby." Like, that shit's hot.
I think the staying present part, that's such a good I there's a book. Have you read Come As You Are? No.
Absolutely.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, by Emily Nagoski.
Yes, yes. Such a good book about even talking about, I think my favorite takeaway, the break and the accelerator for
Oh,
women specifically.
yes.
And so, like you're saying, if a woman is in a stressed out state, which could
Mhm.
the stressed out state could even be like, I'm trying to reach this orgasm in time, I'm trying to hurry up, and then you're no pun intended, you're screwed at that point because you're not going to reach it at that point.
Oh my gosh, how often do you hear that one where it's like the case of it takes me too long, the
Yes.
take too long to come. What is
Well,
that?
And statistically speaking, I mean, so for a female, you are the lucky one in the dynamic that you're in, because when you look at statistics, the
Mhm.
heterosexual relationship, right? Like the women has the least amount. I think
Yeah.
that it is in lesbian relationships that it's the highest.
It's like, I think it's 86% for lesbians, something like that, and then, like, isn't it 65% for the hets, for the heterosexual women? Yeah.
Yes. And
Mhm.
I think also the for faking it also
Yeah.
is a lot higher. And I think
Ooh, yes.
the beauty of that is there's going to be a different level of understanding,
Mhm.
like in your dynamic. And I don't want to sound ignorant, so please correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong here, but I think that there's just maybe a different level of patience, sensitivity, understanding to like take your
Mhm.
time.
To an extent, there is. I mean, I still have lesbian clients who fake or feel like they take too long. We're in a patriarchal society, so everybody's just kind of mimicking that same rhetoric, whether it's a queer relationship or a straight relationship. They feel
Right.
like they need to have an orgasm in a certain amount of time. And I'm like, honey, do you have an egg timer like beside the bed? Or it's like, is somebody making you feel rushed? And I hear an equal amount of stories from these people where their partner is making them feel pressured to have an orgasm because it's a bruising their ego. They're like, "Oh, well, my partner
Oh.
stresses me out about it so much." I tell them that it feels good and I'm enjoying myself, like, I don't have to have an orgasm every time. I'm the same way, like, I don't have to have an orgasm every time for sex to be satisfying, and
Mhm.
just as a general population, we don't understand this. We're keeping score. We're like, "How many did you have?" And we ask that boring ass question after sex, "Did you come?" It doesn't tell you shit. Like an orgasm could feel like meh. It could be painful. It could, be unsatisfying. You need to ask your partner, what was your favorite part? When did you feel the closest?
Ah,
What was the hottest part for you? Like
I'm
that is
Whitney,
pleasure.
you're gonna see a post coming out with this, like, I'm still in this content, I will tag you in it.
I hate that question. Did you come? It tells you nothing.
Yes, but I love that you're giving options, because it does seem like okay, so I do think a follow-up question is needed there, kind of like you guys flop down next to each other, or, on each other's chest or whatever the case.
Yeah.
A question is gonna happen, and so I
Yeah.
love what you're saying. What was your favorite part?
When did you feel the closest to me is one of my favorite sides from a partner. Or, what do you want to do again? Like, that's like,
Yes. Yeah, and to make that part of the aftercare of that, of checking in, what a difference that would make, because then it's not about it bruising egos, it's not about feeling
mhm.
rejected. A lot of women, if their male partner doesn't orgasm, there's feelings of rejection. I mean, I'm
Yes.
sure you talk with your clients about that all the time.
Yes, they feel like, their partner's not attracted to them, and, I've talked to men where they feel like the pressure to do it, and, underneath that feeling of obligation, we get decreased arousal. So it's like, arousal is the main event. That's what my partner always says, because she'll tell me, I don't want to come yet. I don't want to come yet. I want to immerse in this. I want to swim in this feeling of arousal. And she's like, if I
Mhm.
come, then this, what I'm basking in, it stops and I have to build back up, or it's like it becomes something else.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of communication then that goes on, of even where you guys are at in, like, what part of the arousal you're in.
Yes, we talk the whole time. She tells me if she wants to build, she wants to immerse in something. She's like, I want to stay here. So I try to keep her there, like messing with the sensation, like decreasing it or stopping it. She hates when I stop it. That usually gets my head grabbed and I pull back and I was like, you said you didn't want to come. So I'm trying to like keep you in this space. But
Trying
yeah,
to
she'll
find
say
balance.
when she wants to come. She tells me when she wants to stop coming. Like I just keep going until she taps out. So
That's, I mean, did you guys come into the dynamic that open already, or did you guys build that together?
well, she recognized me from TikTok when we matched on Bumble. So when we matched, it was like the first thing she said, she was like, I know who you are. And I was like, uh-oh, I feel like you've got the unfair advantage here. And I was like, I
Mm.
hope you're using this for good and not for evil. But it was like a lot of pressure on me because who I am on TikTok. I was like, well, I hope you don't think I'm going to like blow your mind without gathering information about you, because I need to know how your body works before I can really do it well. So that I felt like a lot of pressure on myself. But
Of
because
course.
of my education, and then she was like very open. She's done a lot of personal work. So she was just like this very sturdy, grounded person. So she had a lot of confidence. And that just with that, we were able to just go deep with it. And that she loves the banter and like the back and forth during, like, we laugh, we joke, and then it gets really hot at some parts. It's just really easy because it's so safe. It can just go anywhere.
And so you were already doing what you do prior to meeting her then is what
Yes,
okay, so you had already been deep diving into this type of work.
absolutely. Yeah.
And thank you for normalizing the pressure that comes along with that, because yeah, that wants to be every man's
Mhm.
joke when they find out I'm a relationship expert, and like
Yes.
I'm like, yo,
I
don't get
was
your hopes
curious.
up. I
That
had
was my
somebody.
next question. Did you feel that pressure too?
Yeah, oh my God. Like, yes. And I have people comment on like on Instagram or in my DMs, and they'll be like, oh my God, you'd probably be like such a dream to be in a relationship with. And you would be,
Mhm.
and the guy I'm dating is just like over here cracking up as he's like, yeah, a real fucking dream. I'm like, I'm a human at the end of the day. Like, and of
Absolutely.
course he's teasing. Maybe he's not, but point being, no matter if we're an expert in what we do or not, like,
Mhm.
yes, be aware of just like as basic people, like the lay person, be aware that
Mhm.
just because we're experts in this does not mean that we are perfect in this.
Oh, no. We just have a lot of tools, but the work is still the same, you know? It's like,
Exactly. Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Very well said. Whitney, where can people find you and all of your brilliance and all of your wisdom on, yeah, all your socials?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is my website. So it's bde-moves.com, and that has all of my socials. So if you like getting on social media, I'm on Instagram. I'm really big on TikTok. That's where I'm the biggest. And all of my playlists are organized on TikTok. So I have everything nice and tidy. So you don't have to like swim through all of them. You can hit the pleasure based playlist, the attachment theory playlist, or different desire styles. That's a big one because when couples have desire discrepancy, they don't know how to communicate. So like, one person wants it all the time and one person wants it twice a month. How do we connect?
Mm.
How do we talk? So those playlists are there. And then I have a Patreon community so I can talk uncensored, because do you have trouble on Instagram, like sharing your type of content? Have you had any issues on there?
I have not as of yet, no, but I have friends that have, and on TikTok as well.
TikTok is, I've gotten in big trouble over there. This is my second account that I have there, but I've, I've done well on Instagram. It's not been too bad, so I'm glad
Yeah.
that you're doing well there. Um,
But
but yeah,
on the Patreon, you can speak.
you can do whatever. I can pull dildos out. I can do demos, like I do oral demos and things like that for a lot of the late blooming community. So like women coming out of the closet, like 35 plus, they're scared to death. They're like, I don't know what to do with a woman. And I'm like, come over to my Patreon. I will show you directly.
That's
That's
so
cool.
helpful. That is like, and I mean this so genuinely, that's such
Mhm.
a service that you're providing,
Thank you.
because I know that that is real. I mean, I talk to people about that. That is such a struggle of like, I don't know what I'm doing. So then there's the
Mhm.
insecurities that impact intimacy. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that you're providing that knowledge.
I'm just trying to decrease the performance anxiety. It's like,
Yes, which is much needed. Well, Whitney, thank you again. It really has been such a pleasure, pun intended that time, to have
right.
you here. And I really enjoyed hanging out with you.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thanks, Whitney, for that arousing conversation. And thank you all for hanging out on Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for my newsletter, and find me on Instagram at Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick.